There's much to talk about. Let's get to our panel. Joining us from New York is gender equality activist and social entrepreneur Shruti Kapoor. With us from New Delhi is Sohini Bhattacharya. She's the CEO and president of Breakthrough India, an organization focusing on adolescent empowerment and domestic and sexual violence. Priyali Sur is a documentary filmmaker and women's rights activist. And joining us from Mumbai via Skype is journalist Karishma Asoodani. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Karishma, let me start with you. You were a victim of sexual violence. When and how did that happen? What can you tell us about that?
Well, I think as part of being a journalist and is on your field job, this is something very common. But I think had you asked me this question a year back, I wouldn't be able to answer. But with all that's been happening in India, it's time that I speak up. This has been happening on and off when you're on field. So when I go out there to report, and one of these big events that I remember that happened like 5 months back in the city of Bombay, where a bureaucrat was supposed to come, and as he arrived, there were a group of bodyguards and group of media journalists, group of photographers, photojournalists surrounding. As we believe that in newsroom, all that matters is you get your news right. And when I tried going in there, I've had experience of bodyguards and photojournalists pushing me right on my chest. Just not that. There have been a lot of other instances while I travel, since Mumbai is the city where if you have to move from place to place, the public transport is your only option. And one day around 7:30 p.m. when I was walking down from a station to my place, there was this drunk kid of, I think, about 17 to 18 years, if I could judge by his visual appearance, who walked in just walking in right opposite me in the same direction. And I kept walking thinking that would probably pass by, but he just walked in and groped my breast. And I stood there very stunned because I didn't know what to do. I wanted to hit him. I went on to pick my slippers to do something, but he ran away. There were a group of friends who just came and started apologizing, saying that he's emotionally broken down.
Now, looking at that experience that you went through, how did that leave you? I mean, do you take more precautions right now? Are you aware of your surroundings when you go about?
I'm scared. I'm honestly very scared. I have to think about everything. I have to think about if I should be taking train at a particular time or not. I'm scared if I should probably be roaming around in a particular cloth, because even if I'm fully dressed, then any man comes and attacks me. So what if I'm even half dressed to a party? How safe is that going to be? I was emotionally broken down for a while, but till what time can you live with that feeling? So I had to come out. I mean, I know I'm strong, and even today I could probably walk a lonely road, but somewhere down inside me, there is a scared girl wondering that I can be attacked anytime.
Okay, let's go to Shruti Kapoor. Shruti, according to India's National Crime Records Bureau, in 2016 alone, there were 19,800 cases of child rape in India. That's an 82% increase over the previous year. That's in 1 year. In fact, India's Nobel laureate Kailash Satyarthi said that it's a national emergency. What drove that increase, that massive increase in just 1 year?
I think cases of sexual abuse and harassment against children have always existed in India. The reason why we are seeing spikes in numbers now is because there's a lot more awareness, and you know, there are a lot more organizations like Safety and Breakthrough working on these issues. Children, parents are constantly being encouraged to speak out, to report these cases, and that's why we see huge spikes in you know, reporting, as a result of which there is more data being reported in 2016 versus, you know, probably in the 2000s or earlier. So I think it's a function or a factor of higher awareness and higher encouragement to report these cases. Child abuse, rape cases have always existed in India, but they were always, and they're still a taboo to talk about. As we probably know, a lot of times children are abused by their own family members, and therefore they're always discouraged to talk about these issues or share these stories. But in the more recent years, we are seeing parents openly talking about it, and a lot more reporting happening, and that's why we are seeing a spike in these numbers.
Right, that's what we've heard. There's great underreporting of these crimes. Sohini, Shruti just spoke there about your organization, Breakthrough India. You focus on empowering adolescents. What do you teach them and what's been the response?
So, you know, we've, and I'd like to kind of agree with Shruti that 94% of the cases of abuse that happens to young girls and boys also of 15 to 18-year-olds are by family members or, you know, people who are known to them, neighbors, friends of parents, you know, family friends. And if you see the rise in reporting, there's a huge number of cases that goes unreported, you know, not even underreported, they're unreported. In our own surveys have shown that sexual harassment among the 15 to 18-year-old is rampant. The HUC study, the HUC is a Center for, you know, Child Rights, HUC study of, you know, 2016 shows 94% is the number. So, the kind of crime that we are handling here is huge, you know. And recently what we have been seeing is horrific cases of children who've then been killed because, you know, the whole thing of the perpetrators don't want to be identified. Yeah. So all of these issues have been staring at us for centuries because of the patriarchal nature that India, you know, it's a deep-rooted patriarchy that India has nourished over the years. And yes, there is a lot of awareness and a lot of, you know, initiatives taken by a lot of people to now address that. In Breakthrough, what we've done is we've created a very innovative curriculum called Gang of Stars, where we focus on gender discrimination and how young people can understand it and take action on it. And we use this curriculum for 11 to 14-year-olds in government schools. And recently in a study by the Poverty Lab at JPAL at MIIT, we've seen that attitude change around gender and behavior change around gender has been huge, has been very, very significant even among boys, more significant among boys than girls.
All right. Priyali, you know, when we talk about sexual violence in India, we always remember that very notorious case in New Delhi in 2012 where a young woman was assaulted and raped. Now, you produced a documentary called Men Against the Tide, featuring men from rural and urban India. Who are challenging patriarchal norms in the country. First, remind us about that rape case and tell us what you found in these young men.
So I think Sohini and all the three of them actually kind of touched upon the idea of how important it is to have men in this entire program, you know, in the program of gender sensitization and about reducing violence against women. The 2012 Nirbhaya rape case was brutal. It was about a young girl being gang raped on a bus. And I think it also brought about attention to the fact that bystanders kind of just looked, which is a huge problem in India. But I think the education, the whole thing is that we need to bring about institutional reforms. And that's what I kind of found during filming the documentary, that men at every level probably needed to be educated, probably needed to be sensitized, be it at the police level, be it at school level, be it at medical level. Right. We have leaders who are actually talking about blaming women for the violence that happens to them. We have leaders in the parliament sitting and saying that women get raped because they step out at 11 at night. They get raped because they step out at 6 p.m. at night. I mean, if this is the condition of what the leaders are saying, then what are the younger boys going to actually learn, right? People say that rape happened to women because they consent to rape. That is ridiculous.
Yeah, it sends the wrong message, doesn't it? Yeah.
And if government comes out with knee-jerk reactions and solutions saying things like death penalty is a solution, I don't think death penalty can be a solution to any kind of sexual violence. You pretty much need a rather institutional reform to take place.
Well, there's a lot of debate in India now over the death penalty used in cases of child rape. Karishma, many in India and elsewhere say that there is a culture of impunity when it comes to child rape. Now, the government has introduced the death penalty for those convicted of child rape. That was done by executive order. But as we've just heard, critics of this policy say that it's fraught with problems. On the one hand, many of these rape cases take place with people that the victims know in families, among friends, so there's a reluctance to report that. On the other hand, the victims sometimes are murdered because of this policy to prevent them giving testimony and testifying at their trials. What do you make of those critics?
Right. So I think that's the problem with, the Indian mentality, that there are few groups, there are few societies, segregated societies and communities who think that it wouldn't be right to voice out. And that is the point where we actually lose, because when we as a country blame authorities and the authorities take a step, then it is we as a country, as a society and as a community that don't support the authorities. I mean, all you have to do is just go voice out, go support. But it's I think about the mentality, it's about the customs, it's about traditions, it's about cultural disparities, which has made families and societies and different communities from rural areas, from prominent urban areas also to keep quiet on such matters. So until and unless you bring about a change in this thought, until and unless you express and voice out that what has happened wrong and deserves to be justified, I don't think there will be a change.
Shruti, there was an article in the British newspaper The Guardian. It was written by the Indian researcher and academic Dr. Deepa Narayan, in which she said that India is at war with its girls and women. She calls it, quoting her here, a culturally sanctioned degradation of women. I mean, that said, it appears that this problem, as we've just heard from Karishma as well, goes far deeper than just these criminal cases that we're hearing about, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I completely agree with that Guardian article. I think the problem of sexual violence and harassment has always existed in our society, and it stems from a very, very deep rooted patriarchal system that we live in. There is rampant gender inequality in our society, and we can always scream and shout and blame the institutions, but at the end of the day, we have to look back at ourselves as a society and take accountability for our actions also. And I think that our society is always missing on that point, so we're always blaming the government, the laws. The laws have always been there. So the recent, law that is introduced wherein a perpetrator who rapes anybody under the age of 12 will be given a death penalty. Under the POCSO Act, there was life imprisonment for these rapists, and nothing really changed the ground reality. So the laws have always existed, but I think it's high time that we as a society need to look at ourselves and our actions. We need to look at our own homes. We are pointing a finger always at the government and the institution and the police, but if you go back in your own homes, you see that gender stereotyping starts at a very, very young age. The minute a child is born in your house, you start segregating them into pinks and blues and what a girl can do and what a boy can do. And I think we are doing a disservice as a society by constantly perpetuating these gender stereotypes, because it is from there that these crimes are perpetuated, and that we are seeing such horrific use of rape as a weapon. Women are being objectified, and today we are in a situation where our women and our young girls are brutally being raped and murdered and killed, and we are not able to do much about it as a society.
Right, Priyali, as Shruti says, a lot of this starts at home. In fact, in that article that I was referring to, written by Dr. Narayan, she says the oppression of women and girls starts in the home. Girls are locked up. She says everyday violence is a product of a culture that bestows all power on men and does not even want women to exist. Women are taught to be afraid of their own bodies. In a sense, has that led to a culture of tolerance of these crimes when it should be one of outrage?
Right. So I completely agree with Shruti's point that it's not just institutional reforms, it has to be at home as well. It is very deep-rooted in India. In a country where a girl child is even fighting to be born, because there's such a high rate of female feticide and female infanticide. You go to school, there's a chance that you're pulled out of school because of child marriage. A woman, a little girl, is fighting at every stage. I understand that. But it also needs tremendous institutional reforms. If there isn't an institutional reform, if there isn't a backup from the government side of a complete institutional overhaul, then this is not going to happen just because people in the home change their mindset.
Okay, tell me, what should that institutional reform look like?
Well, it should start at the very basic level of gender sensitization in schools, in colleges, in police stations. When women go up into police stations to file their complaints, this is what I kind of noticed when I was doing the documentary films, people are not taken, the women are not taken seriously. There's a tendency to blame the woman for being victimized. Well, are there proper sensitization programs being conducted in police stations? Are police women being also trained to take in those complaints?
Right.
When women go into, as victims, into hospitals, they are subjected to double victimization through things like two-finger tests. Is there a proper system to actually check these women who come in after being sexually violated? Is there a proper system to take care of them? We are talking about fast-track courts in the legal system, but how many fast-track courts really do exist? How many cases are being fast-tracked? And the conviction rate for even child rape cases is just about 28%. That is ridiculous. So when we are talking about fast-tracking cases, when we are talking about life imprisonment, we are talking about death penalty, we're not actually providing a proper deterrence. The proper deterrence should exist from a very basic foundational level. So
Sohini, we hear in many cases of women who report these crimes at police stations, as we've just heard from Priyali as well. They report these cases and they're humiliated. Their questions asked about their own promiscuity and things like that. Let's listen to one Bollywood actor, Nazaruddin Shah, and let's listen to what he had to say about what it would take to change the cultural mindset in India. Let's watch.
You're talking of a complete change of mindset. You're talking of a complete reversal of the attitude men have always had toward women. You're talking of a generational change, and that can't happen. All we can do is to try to set the example in our personal lives. We can't do more than that. We can't go around policing. Every girl can't possibly keep a pistol in her handbag or learn martial arts. It just has to. It has to begin with us, with each one of us.
So, Sohini, what did you make of what he had to say there?
So I completely agree with that. You know, I mean, we work on gender norms transformation, and it begins with us. It begins with transformation of the self and the movement from actually me to we, you know. So one by one, people start changing, and then there's a whole community of people who change. And at the same time, you have to create an ecosystem where that change is enabled. So, you know, you can empower a little girl to say, no, I'm not going to get married at 13, 14, 15. But the society has all to support her and say, no, all right, we support you, we hear your pain, and we are here for you. So it has to begin from self, but at some point of time, that self has to translate into a collective transformation.
Karishma, to Priyali's point about the need for institutional change, I mean, let's look at some of the things the government has done. It has introduced the death penalty, as I pointed out, for those convicted of child rape. Question is, why only now? This is not a new problem. Even the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, has said that it's a matter of great concern. He said, question your sons. So is there the political will to make the changes that are needed? And should we also take these changes that we are seeing right now against the background of the fact that there is a general election coming up in India next year?
Of course. I mean, well, that's a very interesting question, that why this now, and also a question followed by this is, will this be continued post the political agendas? I do not know if it's because of general elections or if it's because of any other kind of vote bank strategies. But I do know that in something as human and as sensitive issue as this, there was a war between two political parties, which speaks high about how the authorities are not really concerned about the issue, but rather concerned about how they're looking to strategize their own elections. But keeping that aside, I also think that it's never better late than never. And if they've started to think about it, I think they should start continuing to start implementing other such things and bring justice. But since general elections is also around the corner next year, it could be one of the points that this is being strongly taken out.
Priyali, you want to say something?
Yes, I want to say that the Prime Minister kept silent for a very long time. It's a known fact. that after these rapes happened to these 2 children, the Prime Minister was silent for a very, very long time. So is this too late a reaction? And is it the right reaction? Is the death penalty a really right reaction to have? Shouldn't the right reaction be to have more budget and more systems put in place to look at child protection? The budget for child protection is only about 0.8% of the entire budget for the country. Why is that being ignored? Should there be like more proper policies and at every level things to look at child protection? So I would say that this is perhaps, as Karishma said, could be vote bank politics.
Okay, Shruti, if we look at that, another very notorious case in India, the case of the 8-year-old girl who was raped in Indian-administered Kashmir, that was very recent. Now, she was Muslim. 8 Hindu men were arrested for this crime. And I'm wondering to what extent does religion and caste in India play a role in this violence that we are seeing right now?
So it's extremely unfortunate that in this particular case, the one that happened in Jammu and Kashmir, it was totally driven by religion and caste. The main motive behind raping that little 8-year-old girl was to drive away and instill fear amongst a nomadic Muslim community that was occupying a specific region of Jammu and Kashmir, and it was purposely done by some Hindu men. So this particular case, it was extremely driven by religion to instill fear, and religion and caste has often been used in India to perpetuate hate crimes. So this is not something new. We have seen that in the past. There have been riots, there have been violence against women, there have been communal violences just based purely on religion. And I think, once again, we as a society need to take a step back and evaluate our actions. And it is one thing to follow one's religion and to advocate for one's religion, but to go to that inhuman steps of raping young girls and raping children and killing them at the cost of our women and girls, I think it is a time that we as a society must step back and hold our leaders accountable for the sad state of affairs in these states. There were policemen involved in this case. There were women and men actually out protesting against these rapists getting any sort of punishment. We even saw the Indian flag being used in these protest marches.
Right.
And the government really did nothing much and stayed silent for a really long time. And therefore, as citizens, we must hold our governments, our leaders accountable when religion and caste takes over and at the expense of the lives of our citizens.
Priyali, I've just got a minute left. Do you have any confidence at all that things will change, that there will be the kind of changes that you've been calling for, that you've been asking about?
Well, I think the civil society in India is very powerful. I think the civil society in India is very vibrant. It's thanks to people like Sohini, like Shruti, and many other women like them that people get out on the streets and ask for what they deserve, for what is their right. So yes, there is hope that change might happen. But I also want to quickly make a point, and I know we have short time, that while we talk about violence against women in India and this being politicized, it's a global problem.
Oh, yeah.
Marginalizing the already marginalized, be it race, sex, caste, it's a global problem. And we're seeing leaders do that across the world.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Well, that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for joining us. That's it for this edition of The Heat, but the conversation continues online. Join us on CGTN America's Facebook page to comment on this or any other show, or chat with us on Twitter at CGTN America. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.